رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته. Before we stop for the month of Ramadan, I believe the last chapter that we took from HadithDisciple, a summary of the prophetic seerah of An-Nawawi rahimahullah, was speaking on the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's uncles and his aunts. The uncles and the aunts of the Messenger of Allah. And if my poor memory serves me, I believe we also spoke on the next chapter concerning the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam's wives, fi azwajihi, if I'm not mistaken. Right, Mick? Talking about his wives, right? Polygamy came up. He didn't marry another woman when Khadija was alive. We did that, right? Tight, okay. So therefore, the next chapter, on page 46, Nawawi rahimahullah ta'ala, he says, Faslun fi mawalihi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. The chapter concerning the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam's molas. His molas. Obviously the plural of that is mawali. The mawali of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. The word mola in the Arabic language has three usages. Three usages. When we say mola, or you hear the word molana. Molana. You heard the word before. Molana. Molana, this one and that one. And that's a very interesting benefit with regards to Islam, and with regards to culture, and with regards to the effect of each other, one upon the other. So for example, you go to different countries, and the people have different cultures, and they use different Islamic terms. In one country, the learned person is called a sheikh, alama. Another country, they won't call him sheikh or alama, they call him mola. And the learned person is called molana. I would understand this, molana. Are we clear on this? Or class. One country or one culture, they say, a dars. I'm going to a dars. I'm sitting in the durus. Many Muslims from other countries, they'll never use that word. They say a halaqah. Other cultures, they'll say a ta'lim or a talim or a bayan. All of those words, they can be used synonymously. A dars is ta'lim, ta'lim is a dars you sit in a halaqah, and a halaqah, the speaker is supposed to be making a bayan. But they're different cultural influences. Just like clothing as well. You have an izar. You have on what it seems to be a shalwar kameez. You have on a full-length kameez, a full-length thobe. You have a head wrap, a taqiyya. You have red in your beard. There's a reason behind this. All Muslims don't put hinna in their beards. All Muslims don't wear izars. All Muslims don't wear a thobe, or some Muslims don't cover their heads. All Muslims, or Muslims, they differ on the mustache. Certain cultures, certain madhabs, they shave the mustache. And that's how a learned person is supposed to look. And you go to other cultures, they don't shave the mustache, they just trim it. And a third culture, they cut it down and they trim it above the lip. There's a reason why. And when it comes to the Arabic language in these terms, there's a reason behind that as well. And there's no accident when you have the different movements in a town, a place, a village, a country. It has an effect upon the people, how they dress, how they eat, how they talk. Years ago, people didn't dress like this. When they were dressing like Muslims, they wore a different type of clothing. They used a different word to address a learned person or an imam, and so on and so forth. So the word mola is one of those words. And you hear people saying molana, molana fulan, molana this one, molana that one. So what does the word mola mean? The word mola in the Arabic language has three usages. Three usages. 2 to 3 main usages. And many of those usages are totally oxymorons, totally opposite, different. Sometimes the word mola, it means a master, a leader, a supreme chief. And other times the word mola means someone who's a slave, the exact opposite of a leader or a master, someone who's in bondage. And the third usage of the word mola is someone who used to be a slave. Someone who was manumitted. He was released, he or she they were given their freedom. Everyone understand this? Or a fourth meaning, which is similar to the first three, is someone who used to own you, and now you attribute yourself to them. And that's very similar to American culture, especially black American culture, with the concept of Johnson being your last name. Why is your last name Johnson? Who was Johnson? Where did that come from? Everyone understand this? Robinson, or whatever last name that you have. Where does that come from? You're no longer a slave, you're no longer in bondage, but you still have that name. There's a reason behind that. Everyone understand this? There's a reason behind that. So in the Arabic language, the word mola could mean a master. And obviously that's going to be used when you say Maulana. Yeah, Sheikh Maulana, he's a great imam. And the word mola could mean an actual slave, someone who's in bondage. And the word mola could be someone who used to be a slave or was manumitted. And occasionally or sometimes it's used pertaining to the one who used to own a person. Mawalihi. He's ascribed to this tribe, to this name. Everyone understand this? So this chapter, it says, now we don't want to get into anything deeper than that. This says, fi mawalihi. And obviously, the molas of the Prophet ﷺ are going to be one or two meanings. Someone was a slave and servant of the Prophet ﷺ, or someone that the Prophet ﷺ manumitted and freed. Everyone understand this? Someone that used to be a slave, and the Prophet ﷺ gave him or her their freedom. The mawali of the Prophet ﷺ. Everybody understand this? Linguistically. Everybody got this? Linguistically. As far as why is this in his book, what does the Prophet ﷺ's molas have to do with seerah? It's very important. And that's because anyone and everyone who had contact, some type of relationship with the Prophet ﷺ, they were documented. And they were known, and it was memorized, it was written down, it was well known who came in contact with the Prophet ﷺ. And who the Prophet ﷺ had a relationship with. You understand this? And this is a virtue and not a vice. And that's because we know everything about our Prophet, everything about him. As we said before, who he was married to. The Prophet had 9 wives when he died. What a horrible thing. He misused women. How could he have 9 wives? You understand this? Somebody, they may say this. So who do you believe in? Who's your prophet? Who's your messenger? What religion do you have? The woman, she may say, well, I'm a Buddhist. Okay, tell me about Buddha. Or I'm a Christian. Tell me about Christ. What about him? What did he look like? How tall was he? What foods did Christ eat? What language did Abraham speak? So on and so forth. Tell me about him. How much actual information can they actually give about the one whom they claim to follow? Us, on the other hand, what would you like to know about the Prophet ﷺ? That what you consider to be good, bad, vice, or virtue, I can tell you everything. This was the Prophet's slave. This was the Prophet's wives. This was the battle the Prophet fought. These are the enemies that he killed. Whatever you want to say, controversial issue, but the information is what? It's there. It's transparently upon the table. I would understand how you use wisdom against them. As a wise man once said, he said what? You'll always be strong if you use the enemy to defeat the enemy. You understand this? You'll always be strong if you use the enemy to defeat the enemy. Someone that try to bring a doubt about Islam, they try to say something negative about the Prophet, you have to be smart enough, trained well enough to do what? Flip it back on them. That's a good thing that we know about the Prophet ﷺ. But you can't tell me anything about the man that you claim to follow and believe in. Something's wrong. And this goes to show you whether you agree with the information or not. That's another step. What does it mean? Did the Prophet have this war? Did he kill these people? Did the Prophet have more than one wife? We'll get there. But the sheer fact is that the information about the man that I believe in, that I love and I follow, it has been what? Preserved. Can you make the same statement? Everyone understand? Everyone understand the wisdom here? Can you make the what? Can you make the same statement? And obviously, they what? They can't. Everyone understand this wisdom here? So you have to be sharp, and you have to learn how to use it against them. So did the Prophet have a slave? Was the Prophet in a polygamous marriage? Did the Prophet do this? Did the Prophet do that? The first step is what? The information is what? Is there. Scientifically preserved. Then the next step is, well, how did the Prophet have more than one wife? How did the Prophet have a slave? So on and so on and so forth. Then we go from there. Everyone understand this? So therefore, they knew everything about the Messenger of Allah, everything about him. Anyone and everyone who came in his noble path, he had a relationship with, it was what? It was documented. Let alone the concept of, if a person has a slave, if a person manumits a slave, there's going to be an even more intimate relationship. Because this person has access to you. This person serves you. This person knows where you sleep. This person prepares your meals. This person is tending to your riding beast, your horse, your camel. There has to be some type of relationship there. Everyone understand this? Let alone if someone is kind. If someone manumits you, frees you from slavery, it's a tremendous blessing. Everyone understand this? It's a tremendous blessing. And no one can realize light until he or she has experienced darkness. So people today, do they value their freedom? Honestly, do people really value their freedom? Some people do. But how many of your friends, how many of our family members don't value their freedom? So much so, for a couple years back, forgive me if I'm a little outdated, there was a clothing line and a group they called what? What do they call them? State property. State property. I want to be property of the what? The state. Just think how sick of a mentality that is. I'm an inmate. I'm in prison. I'm locked up. There is someone who tells me when I can eat, when I can shower, how I sleep, who am I sleeping with, how I dress. Someone who has access to all my personal information in and out of the prison because I'm state property. Think about that now. Would people, especially a black American, when they make that statement 200 years ago, 150 years ago, would they want to be state property? The people fought and struggled to have freedom, to have civil rights, to have equal rights, to be treated with respect. And now the people today, they want to call themselves what? State property. And brag and boast about being property of a state. It's a twisted mentality. So oftentimes people, they don't value their freedom. They rush to go back to jail. They rush to go back to incarceration. We know that it's a messed up system, unfortunately. We know that it's a cycle, a wheel that is spinning. And oftentimes it's very difficult to stop the wheel without losing your hand. We know this. Unfortunately, you get locked up, you come home, no one wants to hire you, no one wants to take you in, you can't get a job. What are you going to do to survive except for go back to what sent you to jail in the first place? And that's a long conspiracy in itself, of course, the drugs and guns being in the inner city. We don't go with no other conspiracies right now. I'm trying to make a point. And that is many people, whether it's their fault or the fault of someone else or conspiracy of someone else, most people, or many people, they don't value their freedom. And you can't appreciate something unless you know what it's like to be in the opposite. And this is one of the wisdoms of a person being a slave and a person being manumitted and a person being let go. You know the value of freedom. Everyone understand this? So therefore, that's first and foremost. Secondly is, the concept of slavery in Islam is a very controversial topic. It's a great controversy. And there's several reasons. And we have different people, different players on the playing field. Number one, we have Muslims who, whether you call them apologetics, Muslims who want to make Islam something which is pleasing, something which is agreeable, something which everyone can accept, something which is 101% totally politically correct. And obviously they're going to have to make many, many sacrifices to do that. They're going to have to shave and trim and cut many things from the orthodox Islam to make it politically correct. So that's one group of people that we have. This is what Islam is. Islam is peace. Oh no, that's no such thing. This rule, no, that's not true. Someone to make it a politically correct 2.0 modern progressive religion for the people today. And then we have another group, those who have no type of vision with regards to progression. And they may be mentally a bit archaic. They may be stuck in a time in which they don't understand the flexible things of the Sharia versus the solid things of the Sharia. There are things in the Sharia which do not, cannot, and will not change. And there are other aspects, other applications which change from time to time, place to place, situation to situation. But they only have one speed. This is like one-trick ponies. There's only one speed that they have, and that is stone. And that's a problem. When you give dawah to people in 2019, you go to work, you go to college, you live in a place for non-Muslims, and you're stuck in that stone cinder block mentality, it's going to be very difficult to give dawah, and it's going to be very difficult for someone to accept your dawah that you're trying to give to them. Extremely difficult. And then we have those who are in the middle, who are balanced. Those who know that there are solid principles in Islam. Solid principles of the Sharia, things that do not, cannot, and will not change, period. And anyone who wishes to change them and alter them for political atmosphere or economic situation or whatever the case may be, it may fall into, without doubt, kufr akbar, waliyadu billah, major disbelief, changing the rules of Allah Azza wa Jalla. But there are other applications of certain rules which, without a question, are flexible. And in certain times, certain places, and certain scenarios, they must be flexible. If not, they'll break. Let alone these people who have the proper knowledge, who understand is that there are many rulings, supposed rulings, which are based off of ijtihad of scholars that were suitable for a time and of a place, but not necessarily in a different time and in a different place. A different time and a different place. Minority versus majority. Muslims being in control versus Muslims being weak, even if they are the majority. Muslims being the inventors. Muslims being the conquerors. Muslims being the trailblazers, the explorers, versus Muslims depending upon the technology, the exploration of non-Muslims. That's the reality of 2019. You cannot neglect that. It was never a time how it is now, in which the Muslims are behind the kuffar in all walks of life. It wasn't like that. It was different. Everyone understand this? And then we have those who are outside of the realm of Islam, outside of the fold of Islam, who either want to attack Islam, or they may want to accept it, but things like this come between them and taking their shahada, such as slavery. How can there be slavery in Islam? How can someone be a slave? How can the Prophet have a slave? How could he free a slave? That's horrible. And of course, among these people, there's several different groups and schisms. You have those who are on one side of extremism, whether they're Christians, whether they're Jews, whether they're atheists, whether those people who are quote-unquote black nationalists or Afrocentric people, people who wish to follow the religion of ancient Egypt, Hebrew Israelite, whatever word or term you want to give. And they find the concept of slaves and slavery a way to attack Islam and to denounce Islam and to warn people against Islam. Everyone understand this? And it lies no doubt. That's a very, very long discussion. And many people in the United States only accepted Islam, or what they thought was Islam, or what they knew Islam to the best of their ability in the 40s or the 50s, because they ran from social injustice. The civil rights movement. And what happens when that person, that was the reason why he accepted Islam, he didn't read and finds the Prophet had a slave. It's a problem now. And then that Christian, or that Jew, or that atheist, or this person says, you ran from Christian slavery, white slavery, to Islamic slavery and Arab slavery. That's a problem. And then he brings out the history books, and he shows you that the Arab slave trade was years before the Atlantic slave trade and the European slave trade. There were Africans taken from Africa, sold, and they were treated far worse, such as castration. It was well known in the United States and the New World, the West, they wouldn't castrate a slave. It was damage to property. We want the slave to breed, we want the slave to make more numbers. And the Middle East was the exact opposite. Most of the time they wanted women to be slaves. They wanted women to be concubines. And they wanted men to be protectors, to be guards, without any manhood, and they castrated them. So you look at the black people in the West, and look at the black people in the Middle East. When has there ever been a black president or half black president in the Middle East? A black leader, a black scholar, a black this, black that. So you have to be mindful. And you have to have a reason for accepting Islam, which is that you believe in the oneness of Allah. You believe in the oneness of Allah. And you know that Islam is the truth, and it is the just way of life. As far as this social reason, this injustice, this problem, this issue, that could be a reason behind you going towards Islam, but that can't be the reason behind your faith. Everyone understand this? That can't be the what? That can't be the reason behind your faith. Your faith has to be based off of Allah Azza wa Jalla is my creator, and therefore my deity of worship. And he sent a man whose name was Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, whom I must follow, and it's the only way to get to Allah Azza wa Jalla. Everyone understand this or not? But what made me interested in Islam was civil rights movement. What made me interested in Islam was the differences between the slavery here and the slavery there, so on and so forth. So at the end of the day, speaking historically, there are different pros and cons. There are things which were totally inhumane with regards to slaves and slavery in this country. And things that were far better with regards to slavery in Islam, let alone in the Middle East or North Africa. And there are other things which are what? Worse, as we just gave a few examples of. Other things which are far, far, far worse. I would understand this? That's principle number one, and obviously this is in brief. It's a very, very long historical discussion. Point number two is that if you wish to discuss these issues, you cannot be hypocritical. And you cannot have a double standard, let alone a triple standard. And that is, let's make an example of this. You have people who say, well, you shouldn't be a Muslim. Islam is not the religion of your forefathers and your ancestors. Your ancestors were taken and snatched from West Africa. You should be Akan or this religion or that religion, the religion of your ancestors. We were kings. We were warriors. We have gold. We built the pyramids, so on and so on and so on and so forth. And to the average person says, wow, that makes sense. Whatever person calls himself, 5% or he wears like whatever word they give themselves. You shouldn't be following no Arab person. Don't wear a dress. These Arab people, they hate you. They loathe. They're disgusted at black people, so on and so forth. Why are you walking around looking like them, talking like them, adopting their culture, so on and so on and so forth? Fight. No problem. So therefore I should follow the religion of the people who came from West Africa or of ancient Egypt. No problem. So my question to you is, who built those pyramids in ancient Egypt? You think it was Ramses, Pharaoh, the noble, high-born Egyptians? Who built those pyramids? Except for who? Who? Slaves. And thousands, if not millions of them lost their lives in erecting those great pyramids. So then what? The ancient Egyptians had slaves as well and treated them horribly, terribly, and miserably. So therefore, cross that out. West Africa. Was there such thing as slavery in West Africa? Did any of the kings and the dominions, did they have slaves? Did they trade with the Europeans? Did they trade with the Portuguese? Did they trade with the Spanish? Did they trade with the English? Or the English people, they just came to the coast of Africa, no knowledge of the coast of the countries, and just took everyone and left? Obviously, if you have any respect for yourself historically, you can't say that. So therefore, for argument's sake, there were Africans who sold slaves, and there were white Europeans who did what? Freed slaves. That's another concept with regards to the Underground Railroad. You can say whatever you want. Harriet Tubman, Frederick Douglass, all of the abolitionists, they would have been nothing without the help and the support of what? Of the Quakers. They were free and they were white. And they were the ones who had the candles in their windows. They were the ones who sung the songs at night. Those were the ones who gave them the safe passage to this city, to that city, to Buffalo, to Canada. And if it wasn't for them, they wouldn't have had a chance to escape and leave slavery. So your whole argument now is hypocritical. So therefore, we have historical evidence that there were great kingdoms in West Africa that had slaves. How did they treat them? What did they do? That's a different story. But the fact is that slavery was a practice of ancient Egypt. Slavery was a practice of West Africa. And slavery was a practice of those other nations that you're saying that we should be like, not the Arabs. So therefore, your argument isn't making any sense anymore. Everyone understand this? Abolishing slavery, I follow a religion away in which there's no slavery. Then we can talk and we can debate. Or, how is a slave treated? So on and so forth. Perhaps we can talk and debate. But you're saying I have to be a Hebrew Israelite, or really from the descendant of this person, or we should be like the ancient Egyptians, so on and so forth. And then you just cut out a major part of the history, which is slavery and slave labor. Then obviously you're being contradictory and hypocritical. And there has been no major monument built in the history of man without what? Slaves. That's the reality of life. The Great Wall of China. Do you know how many people died? Do you know how many people died of frostbite, of starvation? Read the books. And you'll be shocked how many people died just erecting the Wall of China. It's the reality of life. So therefore, take a stance and position which is based off of knowledge and science. As far as you picking what you want to pick, Islam promotes slavery, the Arabs had slaves and no one else, everything else is wrong, that's not going to work. Everyone understand this? It's an extremely important principle when we talk about slaves and slavery in Islam and what? Outside of Islam. The last basic principle that I will give, which is extremely important, is do not accept the popular narrative that slavery is based off of color. Slavery was never based off of color. Slavery was based off of class. It was based off of class. Your status in your class. Someone who's noble, someone who was an aristocrat, someone who was a peasant, someone who was captured, a fierce warrior in battle, who was captured and then sold as a slave, regardless of his or her color. Everyone understand this? So there were nobles who were black, and there were slaves who are pale as snow. So the concept of slavery wasn't based off of color. The people who came from Europe and other countries and took slaves supposedly from the Gold Coast across the Atlantic Ocean, supposedly, because that's a theory in itself, with regards to the Atlantic Passage. That's a very long discussion in itself. How accurate is that? At the end of the day, someone, I don't think no one is going to deny the fact that there were Africans who left that coast and came to the New World, one way or another, on one scale or another. We can agree on that, one way or another, right? Whether 1 million of them, 9 million of them, some of them, we can agree on that. So, what was it based off of? Was it based off of color? Or was it based off of class? And then, as business began to boom, and they saw the strength and the resilience of these slaves in comparison to other nations that were enslaved and died off from disease and from sickness and depression. And they weren't, quote unquote, genetically strong enough to withstand that inhumane, barbaric treatment. They said, hey, you know what? Let's systemize, let's make this into a system. Let's institutionalize this. Let's teach the people, let's educate the people, and let's make them think and feel that it's based off of color instead of class. And that makes it easier for us. We can make more money, we can control the people, we can do this, so on, and then we have the Willie Lynch conspiracy. But it was never based off of color. It was always based off of what? Class. And that's because there were many great nations, the Chinese, the Vikings, these people, those people, they all had what? Slaves. And it wasn't a thing based off of what? The color of the skin. It was based off of the class. Someone is beneath me, I'm above them, I've captured them, I've bought them, they're now my slaves. What happened in the American South, the narrative, how they justified it through Christianity, through science, that's a different story that came later on in history. Everyone understand? And what? Later on in history. So there are parallels and consistencies, and there are things which aren't parallel and aren't consistent. Everyone understand this? And this is an extremely important principle before you talk about slavery in Islam. And you can't just remove it from the Quran. Because Allah talks about it in the Quran, about freeing a slave. فَكُّ رَقَبَةٍ. What do you think that means? Freeing a neck. What does that mean? فَتَحْرِيرُ رَقَبَةٍ. What does that mean? Freeing a neck. That's talking about what? A slave. That you manumit. Everyone understand this? So we can't just take and pick and choose what we want to take and pick and choose. Everyone understand this? So whatever you call yourself, whatever you are, let it be based off of knowledge and science. For blacks against blacks, for whites against whites, for Arabs against Arabs. Let it be based off of what? Solid, historical, hidden. That is our constitution. That's what we abide by, inshallah ta'ala. And that's what we propagate, is that be factual. Whatever you're saying. Everyone understand this? Be factual and don't be extreme. And you don't have to apologize for speaking the truth and spitting the facts. If the first person to go to this country or to build this was a black person, that's the truth. And if it wasn't, then that's not the truth. If this would happen in this person, then that's the haqq. There's no apology needed. And you don't have to be nationalist or bigot or this and that to speak the what? The truth. There's no apology needed for factual information. Everyone understand this? And the moment that facts, we begin to hide them and hinder them and apologize to help someone's feelings or to pat someone on the back or not to make controversy, we've lost the game. And that's when Allah Azza wa Jalla says, وَلَوْ اتَّبَعَ الْحَقُّ أَهْوَاءَهُمْ. And if the truth followed their desires, لَفَسَدَتِ السَّمَاوَاتُ وَالْأَرْضُ. The heavens and the earth will be ruined. If the truth followed the falsehood, everything will be topsy-turvy. So you never have to apologize for a fact. This is what happened. This person did this. He had this. This person was the first one here. This was the best person here. They did this. That's the haqq. And that doesn't make me a nationalist to speak the what? The truth. Everyone understand this? Nor does it make me a nationalist to learn and to study the real history. Nor does it make me a conspiracy theorist to say that I want to read the deeper version and not the surface crust. The narration that's just fed to me and stuffed to me by someone who has a clear biased agenda and a means of propaganda. Extremely important principles, guys. Extremely important principles. Everyone understand this? And the easiest way out of an argument, which is scientific, that's even if we even get into the argument, right? But if we actually get into a scuffle, right? The easiest way is for me to call you a name. You're spitting facts, you're quoting information, oh, you're a black nationalist. Or you're an Arab nationalist, or you're this, you're that. That's easy. That's the cheap way out, is to insult someone. But let's see you ball up your fists, metaphorically, and fight with knowledge and science. Spit the facts. And let's see who wins with respect. No, I just call you a name. And that's what Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah meant when he said, or he's quoted to have said, مَا نَظَرْتُ عَالِمًا إِلَّا غَلَبْتُهُ وَمَا نَظَرَنِي جَاهِلٌ إِلَّا غَلَبَنِي. He says, I never debated with a scholar, a learned person, except that I won. It's not pride or arrogance. He's speaking to what? Undefeated record. I never lost. I never debated with a learned person except that what? I won. And he says, and a jahil, an ignorant person, never debated with me except that what? He won. I can never be the ignorant person because the ignorant person won't let you win. If they can't win the fight, they can't prove their argument, establish the facts, the easiest thing is, oh, you're a deviant. Oh, you're this and you're that. Just call someone that you're ugly. I don't like the way you look. And it's the reality. We have to be mindful of this. All right? So these are some basic principles with regards to this topic. in any other topic or any other discussion of the concept of slavery in al-Islam. Everyone understand this? And we cannot act and we cannot reject the reality that it's a sensitive topic, and rightfully so. It's a topic that has a very rich and deep history of pain and trauma, and people are living in the aftermath of that to this very day, whether you realize it or not. This very day, white, black, yellow, red, orange, they're all in the aftermath of the history of this country. And that is why the author, who wasn't a black person nor a slave, they said, this was their statement. I'm not saying that I believe in this 100%, but they said that slavery is a curse to all. To the white and to the black, the master and the servant. It's a curse. And I'm not going to mention the name of this book, but if you read this book, you'll be shocked at some of the things that you'll find out. A young woman who was violated, or a young woman who was a servant of someone, and she was forced to sleep with someone against her will, he said that slavery was a curse for her. And it was also a curse and a means of destruction for the man that took her against her will. For the young man, the young boy, it didn't teach him any morality. It didn't teach him anything. It destroyed him and made him immoral and low and lustful, and the list goes on. It's a curse to everyone. So the point I'm trying to get from this story is that if there was something that went on for hundreds of years in this country, and it was so impactful, and such a curse, quote unquote, according to that author, then of course, what do 200 years or 100 years make a difference later on? The people are still going to have the what? The after effects of that. They're still going to have the after effects of that. Let alone the fact that slavery didn't end in 1865. It didn't end in 1866. For years, there still was a great deal of systematic and institutionalized slavery. Even if the slaves were manumitted, supposedly. It was still slavery on one level or another. Whether you were in a prison, whether you were in a chain gang, whatever you did, there was still slavery. And there's still slavery to this day, on one level or another. Let alone the Jim Crow laws. Let alone racism and this and that, self-hatred, and the list goes on of the major problems that people have, both black and both white, from the after effects of what took place. Everyone understand this or not? So it's extremely important to read history, and not to read his story, but to actually read history, tarikh, the real history, and not his story. The story of someone who's biased, of someone who hides facts, the story of someone who has an agenda, and they want to keep you boxed in a certain way of thinking. And don't think that it just stops just because you became a Muslim. Don't think that. Everyone understand this? And don't think that racism and civil rights and prejudice and stereotypes and colorism and tribalism, don't think that these things did not exist and don't exist. Where? In the Middle East. In the Middle East. Don't think that. Don't think that they're free from it. No, it's a reality. Everyone understand this? And the bitter reality is, whether you like it or not, there was a Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Malcolm X, or this one, that one in the United States. It wasn't one what? It wasn't one there. Things are different. So wake up or be what? Woken up. Wake up or be woken up. It's a reality. You have to be mindful. And how to accept your religion and how to defend your religion when you have to. And defend the Prophet what? When you what? When you have to. So that's what I'm going to say with regards to that. We can go on and on talking about this important topic and the proper and the improper way of understanding it. So An-Nawawi rahimahullah ta'ala, he says, Minhum Zayd ibn Haritha ibn Shurahil al-Kalbi Abu Usama wa Thawban ibn Bujdud بضم الموحدة والدال واسكان الجيم وأبو كبشة واسمه سليم شهد بدرا وباذام ورويفع وقصير وميمون وأبو بكرة وهرمز وأبو صفية عبيد وأبو سلمى وأنسة بفتح الهمزة والنون وصالح وهو الشكران ورباح بالموحدة أسود ويسار الرائي نوبي ورافع أبو رافع واسمه أسلم وقيل غير ذلك إلى آخره. طيب. He mentions here certain names of people that were slaves of the Messenger of Allah alayhi salatu wasalam, or people that were manumitted and freed by the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. Now before we go forward, one last principle that's very important for us to understand is, why do we read a narration or a hadith and it says a black woman came to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam? A black man came to the Prophet ﷺ. A man came to the Messenger of Allah and he was black. The man said, "O Messenger of Allah, my wife has given birth to a black child." Why do we find these texts? Why does the hadith say, listen to your ruler, obey your ruler even if he's an Abyssinian slave? Even if his head was like this and his hair was like this. Why do we have these texts? What does this mean? What does this mean? So let's make an example now. We're sitting in this masjid. How many people are sitting in this masjid right now? How many people? Naeem, how many people? 40 people? 40 people. Said 40 people. All of a sudden, somebody came in this masjid and they start screaming, going crazy, scratching their face, hollering, pounding on the wall. Right? You went home to your family or Facebook, whatever. You say a Majnoon person came into the masjid. They start screaming and shrieking, going crazy. Right? You would say this, right? Now, keep that same scenario. A person comes to the masjid screaming, shrieking, hollering, pounding against the wall, and they were Chinese. They were Chinese. Any Chinese people in the masjid right now? Raise your hand if you have any Chinese ancestry or you're directly from China. What would you go and tell the people that have in the masjid? You say what? A crazy Chinese person came into the masjid. Because 99%, if not 100% in the masjid, no one here is Chinese. So you're going to have to mention and quote that this person came from China. Everyone understand this? Or, a simpler example, if a Caucasian person came in the masjid, or if it was an all-white masjid and a black person came to the masjid. Many people, they would say, last night, some crazy black guy or African-American guy came in the masjid screaming, hollering, pounding on the wall. They would clearly mention it. Everyone understand this? They would do what? They would mention it. Or, if, let's say, all of us in this masjid, whether it's right or whether it's wrong, let's say we all hate white people, all of us. We detest them. All of us, every last one of them. And I said to you, any speaker who comes in this masjid, honor him, respect him, listen to him, even if he's white. Would you not get the point and the lesson of what I'm trying to tell you? Is that when a speaker comes to you, no matter what you feel about that person personally, do what? Honor them. Does that mean it's right for you to hate white people and to detest white people? But I'm not trying to speak to you about that right now. This is not a hadith in which I'm talking to you about liking or disliking a person. It's not a hadith that's talking about tribalism or colorism. It's a hadith that's speaking about listening and obeying the what? The ruler. Even if he's someone whom you detest and despise. Everyone understand this? So that is the proper understanding of those texts. A black woman came and she said, "O Messenger of Allah," so on and so forth. Because everyone sitting in a circle, they weren't liking that. So therefore, the narrator is going to say that the woman was black. Everyone understand this? If the Arabs, even though the Prophet taught them and educated them, as the Prophet says, the four things in my ummah from Jahiliyyah that they will always have. And from that is taking pride in one's lineage and looking down upon others' lineage. I'm better than you because of my family background. I'm better than you because of this and because of that. Your father was this, my father was that. This Muslims are always going to have this. And the Prophet, if he knew that some of his followers had a problem with this, and he says, listen to the ruler. Obey the ruler. Even if he's someone that you hate and someone that you detest. And someone who's in this country who is a what? Minority. I would understand this. People that talk about the story of Bilal radiallahu ta'ala anhu. One of the reasons why his story was so popular and famous, because he was a what? He was a minority. He was a minority because of his lineage. And if Bilal radiallahu ta'ala anhu was living in Abyssinia, he wouldn't be a what? A minority. I would understand this. Rather, the Arab person who went to Abyssinia as a slave or a trader would be the minority. And then they would say, this Arab person came and said. I would understand the difference? So you have to have the proper understanding of these texts. The proper understanding of these what? Of these texts. And that's the reality of life. If you have 100 people in a room, someone comes who isn't from them, you're going to say that person what they are, who they are. Well, how can that? Everyone understand this? So it's a proper understanding, let alone the fact that you're saying that the Prophet hated black people, the Arabs hated black people this, black people that, all right, no problem. But what about when the Messenger of Allah ﷺ said that this woman who was black is from the people of paradise? That's in Sahih Bukhari as well. What about when the Messenger of Allah became upset at his companions for the woman who died, who used to clean the masjid? And she was black as well. What about that? Did you quote that? Or Bilal, or Najashi. The Prophet ﷺ, he made prayer upon him. The verses that were sent down in the Quran, speaking about those Christians, when they hear the recitation, it makes them cry and weep. The Prophet sent his companions to his city, to his town. I would understand this? The Prophet accepted gifts, sent gifts, so on and so forth. Did you quote that as well? Did you quote that Osama radiallahu anhu was a teenager? And he was made a leader of a great Muslim army. And his skin was what? So you have to quote everything now. And you can't just pick and choose the narrations that you want. And many people, they do things like this. Whether they're Hebrew Israelites, Christians, whatever they are. Everyone understand this? And that's why knowledge is the indestructible sword that can never ever be shattered, and it can cut and slice through anything when wielded properly. So you quote that the Prophet had this slave, no problem. And I also want to quote from Sahih Bukhari that the Prophet said this person was a slave and he wasn't black. Or this black person is in paradise. Oh, Bilal, how'd you get to paradise before me? He asked him. How'd you get to paradise before me? Everyone understand this? So you have to be smart. And you have to study. Everyone understand this? And it's extremely important in defending al-Islam. Last but not least, of course, living in 2019, there are many things that are going to be different and uncomfortable and sensitive to talk about. Such as the quality of life. How much water did the Prophet ﷺ use when he made wudu? When he made a ghusl? Anybody know? How much water for wudu? What does it say? بليش؟ لا يغتسل ايش؟ ها؟ بالصاع ويتوضأ بالمد. You know how much a mud is? Try to make wudu with water like this in your hands. Try to make a ghusl, a full bath with 4 of these. Or use the restroom. Akramakallah. Relieve yourself and use stones to clean yourself off. Can you even ponder and think about that? Living in 2019, using stones to clean yourself from using the restroom. But in the time of the Prophet, that was a what? It's a reality. And there are many other things which are unheard of, things that the people don't do, they don't practice, back then, which was a what? A reality. Some of those things change, and some of those things, the ruling does what? Remains the same. I would understand this or not. So these are crucially important points with regards to talking and discussing about what? Slavery and al-Islam. Everybody clear this or not? I think that's more than enough. Let's move forward to the next chapter. Faslun fi khadamihi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. He then speaks about the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam's servants. People who are khadam. In other words, they were free. They were free people. But they also served the Messenger of Allah alayhi salatu wa sallam. منهم أنس بن مالك وهند وأسماء ابن حارثة الأسلميان وربيعة بن كعب الأسلمي وكان عبد الله بن مسعود صاحب عليه إذا قام ألبسه إياهما وإذا جلس حطهما وجعلهما في ذراعيه حتى يقوم وكان عقبة بن عامر الجهني صاحب بغلته صلى الله عليه وسلم يقود به في الأسفار وبلال المؤذن وسعد مولى أبي بكر الصديق ذو مخمر ويقال مخبر بالباء الموحدة ابن أخي النجاشي يقال ابن أخته وبكير ابن شداخ الليثي ويقال بكر وأبو ذر الغفاري والأسرع ابن شريك ابن عوف الأعرجي إلى آخر كلامه رحمه الله. He speaks about some of the companions who served the Prophet ﷺ. Some of them did different jobs and miscellaneous tasks. Those who brought him his water, those who looked after his wealth, those who carried his sandals, those who made the adhan. They took care of the Prophet ﷺ. He mentions many of them. Next chapter, he says, فَصْلٌ فِي كُتَّابِهِ صلى الله عليه وسلم ذكرهم الحافظ أبو القاسم في تاريخ دمشق أنهم 23 وروى ذلك كله بأسانيده وهم أبو بكر الصديق وعمر الخطاب وعثمان وعلي وطلحة والزبير وأبي بن كعب وزيد بن ثابت ومعاوية بن أبي سفيان ومحمد بن مسلمة والأرقم بن الأرقم وأبان بن سعيد بن العاص وأخوه خالد بن سعيد بن العاص إلى آخره. He mentions the scribes of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The scribes of the Messenger of Allah, those who wrote for him. Whether they wrote down the Quranic verses, the Quranic surahs, or whether they wrote the Prophet alayhi wasallam's letters, wrote things for the delegates and the delegations, wrote things for the dawah, etc. And obviously we have people who say that the Prophet alayhi wasallam could not write, nor could he read. Say he was illiterate, ummi. And then we have people say, no, you can't say that. It's disrespectful. How could the Messenger of Allah be illiterate? And if he was, you can't use that term illiterate. It's too disrespectful of a term. Rather, the Prophet could read and he could write. This verse, this hadith, it means this, so on and so forth. You can't say that. Which of the two sides is right? Is it disrespectful to say that a person was never formally learnt? They were never formally trained and taught how to read and write? Does that mean a person lacks intelligence? Does that mean a person lacks eloquence? Does it mean a person isn't a good leader or administrator, or does that mean something? Let's look at our culture, and you have to take it back to the the hypocrisy of the people making this argument. In our culture, how many great leaders or warriors or stupendous, phenomenal athletes can't do what? Or couldn't do what? Read or write. They make them less than a boxer? Less of a boxer? Is he an author? A scholar? Is he someone writing books? Or he's a professional boxer? He puts on the gloves and he shows you how to what? Read and write. Everyone understand this? Everybody clear this or not? Some of the smartest, wisest people, some of the most clever and wittiest people that you'll come across in your life are people that weren't formally educated in a school or university. There's no doubt about that. Everyone understand this? There's no doubt about that. Stereotypes of people. You find some of the bravest people, some of the smallest people. And some of the most cowardly people, some of the biggest people. It's reality. So just because a person lacks a thing, or doesn't have a thing, or never got exposed to a certain thing, it takes what? Nothing away from them. It takes nothing away from them. Secondly is, what of the two scenarios supports Islam being the truth and it being totally miraculous? Which is the two? The man who brought this tremendous book of eloquence that couldn't read or write, or someone who could read and write? Which of the two, Talib? The first one, without a question. One who gave the story of the Jews and the Christians, the previous nations. If he could read and write, what would they say? That he did what? He stole it from the Christians of Syria, the Jews of Medina. That's where he got the narration, and he put it together. And that's what the ignorant Christians say today. They say this, that the Quran is a sloppy collage of the Old and the New Testament put together. Well, when did the Prophet have access to the Old and New Testament? In 6th and 7th century Arabia. When? Explain to me, when did he have access to those books in Arabic? Let alone the fact, if we have documentation and proof that he couldn't what? Read. So where's he getting it from? And this detail, and this depth, and the parallel accuracy of Moses, of Miriam, of Job, of Jacob, of John, and this and that, Isaac, Ishmael, where's he getting it from? That argument supports what? The truth of Islam. Everyone understand this? And let alone the specific biblical stories, quote unquote, or stories about the previous nations, and the previous prophets mentioned in the scriptures, the Old and New Testament, or the stories that aren't even mentioned therein. So Cain and Abel as an example. Where's that mentioned at? Where can we find a story about Cain and Abel? Can we find in the Old Testament, the New Testament? Can we find mention about Cain and Abel? Yes or no? Can we or can we not? Huh? We know the answer? Is Cain and Abel a biblical story? Tight. So is Cain and Abel also mentioned in the Quran? What surah is Cain and Abel mentioned? What chapter in the Quran? Ma'idah, number 5. What does Allah say about them? Recite to them the story of the two sons of Adam. إِذْ قَرَّبَ. When they both gave a sacrifice. What happened? فَتَقُبِّلَ مِنْ أَحَدِهِمَا وَلَمْ يُتَقَبَّلْ مِنَ الْآخَرِ. Allah says it was accepted from one of them, and one of them it wasn't accepted. So what happened after that? What's the story after that? He killed him. Why did he kill him? Because he was what? Jealous. His jealous anger. Everyone understand this? So what happened after that in the Quran? What does Allah tell us? Something before that. He buried him. How did he bury him? The crow taught him. A bird. Kaifa yuwari. The bird showed him how to what? Bury his brother. He was regretful, so on and so forth, right? So Allah tells us that the bird, the crow, taught who? Cain or Abel? Cain. How to bury? Abel. Everyone understand this or not? So the step number 1 is, you guys have said Cain and Abel were mentioned in the what? Previous books. The story of the crow, is it mentioned in that book? Is the story of the crow mentioned in the Old or the New Testament? Where's the prophet getting that from? Except for where? Sama, the heavens. So the fact that the prophet didn't read or write, that supports that he was true. And if he did read or write, Allah says, إِذَنْ لَرْتَابَ الْمُبْطِلُونَ. the deniers, the falsifiers, the lies, they would have even more doubt. Everyone understands this, and the interesting fact is that crows are said to be from the only animals, quote unquote, birds, that bury their dead. Very interesting fact. And I advise each and every one of you to read about crows. Many unique qualities that Allah placed inside of that bird. And there's no accident why that bird has such importance in many other religions and faiths. The crow is extremely symbolic. So with that being said, the Prophet ﷺ, he mentioned these stories of the previous nations, the people of the past. He couldn't read, he couldn't write. That it has to have some type of importance and what? Significance. Everyone understand this? So it's no disrespect to say that the Prophet ﷺ couldn't what? Read or write. There's nothing wrong with that. Everyone understand this? Everybody clear on this or not? And if the Prophet ﷺ wrote half of a sentence, or if he wrote his name, that doesn't mean that he still wasn't illiterate. Someone could be illiterate, but they have the ability to do what? Write a word, or say something, or read one sentence. Doesn't mean that they're actually what? Learn it in reading or writing. Everyone understand this? Fine. So therefore, these are the companions who wrote things down for him. From them was Abu Bakr, Umar ibn Khattab, Uthman, Ali, Talha, Zubayr, Ubay ibn Ka'b, Muawiyah, and many of the companions, they were scribes of the Messenger of Allah, alayhi salatu wasalam. And that's also one of the virtues of Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan, is that he was one of the people who wrote down the Quran. So if Muawiyah was untrustworthy, and the Prophet never trusted him and this and that, why would he get him to write down the Quran? That's a refutation of those who disrespect Muawiyah and talk bad of him. Khairan, inshallah. There are many other lessons that we can take from that. We're going to stop here from the book and perhaps leave some time for some of the questions. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala surely knows best, and with him is all success. Fadl.
I got a couple questions. The first question is, you was explaining that the lessons of the last descendant, some of them was freed slaves, and some of them was slaves, and some of them was freed slaves. If they was freed slaves, does that mean that he freed them because they was his slaves, or he freed them when they were somebody else's slaves, like in the situation when he said free up the sheep and leave?
First question says, mentioning about the slaves, or the free slaves of the Prophet ﷺ. Does that mean he freed them because they were his slaves, or he freed them from the bondage of someone else? Either of the two. And in Islam, if you free someone, you're called their mola. They're called your mola, either or, the different usages of the term, whether you own them or not. Just like here in this country. Someone who's your master, he says you can go. These are your freedom papers. Or a stranger comes and he says, how much for this one? Such and such. And he gives him the money and he walks off with him free. Either of the two. The blessing of al-itq, of manumission, has been done. And you're indebted, and you show gratitude to the one who what? Manumitted you. Whether they used to own you or what? Someone else came and paid for your freedom. Clear? Wallahu alam. Fadl.
When you was talking about how, when we read in the hadith, when they say the black woman or the black man and so on and so forth, and how you explained it when, it's the minority, but it doesn't also denote that it was air of racism that he was addressing for them not to be like that, such as the case with Abu Dhar, when he said, Bela, O son of a black woman.
Next question. With regards to the ayat or ahadith or tafsir of ayat, which you may find, it may not be mentioned in the Quran, but you find the tafsir, the ahadith or the narrations, a black man came, a black woman came, so on and so forth. And you said that they were the minority, there was something out of the ordinary, so on and so forth. Does that mean that the Prophet was not addressing an air of racism or colorism that existed, so on and so forth? As we just said, the Prophet ﷺ, he spoke on different things at different times. And he would use examples for different things at different times. So as we just said, if the Prophet is trying to make an example of the importance and the obligation of obeying the leader, and he mentions something or someone for an air of racism or colorism, that's the lesson from the hadith. And the hadith is not talking about racism or colorism. Obey the leader, even if the person is lowest in your sight. That's what he's saying. وَلَوْ عَبْدًا حَبَشِيًّا. And an interesting fact about this hadith is the Prophet ﷺ in this hadith, he's not quoted to have said, even if he's walau annahu habashi, or kana habashiyan, an Abyssinian man. But he clearly used the word what? Abdan, slave. Meaning someone who has two things against him, to these people. Number one, his race, and number two, he's a low. And the Prophet never ever said that, speaking or talking about Najashi, Negus, radiyallahu anhu, rahimahullah. Everyone understand this? So the concept of slavery, class versus race, and it doesn't always mean the same thing. Everyone clear on this? But for argument's sake, you despise black people, African people, and he's a lowly born slave. Listen to him because he's your leader. That's what the hadith is saying, nothing else. Number two, as of course, the Prophet, he spoke about racism, he spoke about colorism, and many authentic hadith. Many authentic hadith in which he warned the companions against racism, colorism, tribalism, and jahiliyyah. You clear on that? Point number three is that when we say that Abu Dharr radiallahu anhu said to Bilal, O son of a black woman, so on and so on and so on and so forth. In Sahih al-Bukhari, Abu Dharr radiallahu anhu says that I got into an argument to one of the early Muslims. فَعَيَرْتُهُ بِأُمِّهِ أَوْ كَمَا قَالَ. And I attacked his lineage, not his father, because some people say that Bilal radiallahu anhu was mixed. Some historians say his father was of Arabian ancestry, and his mother was of African ancestry. And some of them actually said he came from royalty as well. His mother was a princess. But that's a long discussion in itself. And with him, he said what? That I got into the argument with this man who had a virtue, and I got angry, I became impulsive, and I insulted him because of his mother. In Sahih Bukhari, it does not state that it was Bilal. Evident. It does not state that in Sahih Bukhari. The narration that says that he said that to Bilal, the least that we can say about that narration, it needs scrutiny and investigation. Let alone say that it's not even authentic. It was a man that he spoke about his mother, but there's no authentic proof in Sahih Bukhari is that he said that to what? Bilal. Rather, that's far-fetched. That Abu Dharr radiallahu anhu would say that to Bilal. And the status that they knew that Bilal had. Allahu Alam. That's first and foremost. And that's very important. FYI. It does not state that in the authentic version of Sahih Bukhari that he said it to Bilal. Everyone understand this? And obviously, as you just mentioned, the Prophet says, Ayartu bi ummihi. He says, you disrespected him because of his mother. Innaka rajulun fika jahiliyyah. He says, you're a man which has jahiliyyah in. That's a deep statement. So anytime you start talking about someone being high or low or above or this and that, just because of race and this and that, and it's not because of what Allah and His Messenger said, that's a statement and that's an act of what? Of jahiliyyah. Everyone understand this? So many people, they'll use that, but they won't quote the last part of the hadith, which the Prophet did not allow any censure to him for that. And that was Abu Dharr. Imam al-Bukhari, rahimahullah ta'ala, he mentions this hadith in the Sahih in Kitab al-Iman. And the concept of kufrun dun kufr, minor kufr, how certain acts and sins and acts and practices of jahiliyyah do not exclude a person from what? The deen. And it's a tremendous story from that hadith. If the Abu Dharr radiallahu anhu al-Ghifari, if the Prophet said that he's a man who has jahiliyyah, how about what? Us, how we talk and joke and say things and look at people. That's scary. It's very scary hadith. Wallahu a'lam. Question says, Assalamu alaikum. May Allah honor you and preserve you upon good. I mean, Sheikh Mufti, is there a concept of law of attraction in Islam? Some people say that they will speak something into existence. Barakallahu feek. Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Wa feek barakallah. Ameen to your du'as, and may Allah bless you as well. Law of attraction. That a person will speak of something into existence, think about something, talk about something, and then that thing can happen and that thing can take place. Obviously, the word or the term law of existence is vague, or law of attraction is vague. What do you mean by that? That a person has the ability to make something happen just because they talk about it or speak about it, or a person is infatuated with a thing, talking about a thing, thinking about a thing, and then something happens and it was their qadr, and it agreed with how a person thought and felt, and they call it law of attraction. I'm scared about getting into a car accident. I'm scared of getting into a car accident. I don't want the next thing to know, bang, get into a car accident. What do you mean by that? It was the qadr for you to get into that car accident. You kept talking about it. It was on your mind, and then it happened. Does that mean that you brought it into existence? Not according to the Aqidah of Islam. It was meant to happen. Did you put the ayn in yourself, this and that? And even that's another concept of ayn. The ayn, nothing takes place except for the qadr. Everyone understand this? So it depends on what you mean. The Prophet ﷺ tells us that dreams are of three types. There's the dream which is true. There's the dream from the shaitan. And it's the dream based off of what a person sees and thinks about and is stressed and worried about, and he does what? Sees it in his dreams. So you keep thinking about it, stressing out, worrying about it, next time you have a nightmare about it. Everyone understand this? So the Aqidah of Islam is clear and plain. Allah Azza wa Jalla, the creator of everything, He's the one who brings everything into existence, and the rest of, or the servants, the slaves, all besides Allah, are poor and have no power and no might, except what Allah Azza wa Jalla gives. And He's the one who brings into existence and takes out of what? Existence. As far as the concept of the mind, the subconscious, that's a long discussion about thinking about a thing, being obsessed with a thing, and next thing you know, what? The thing happens, or you think that it happens, because that's what you want to see. Because you have a full cup. She's made for me, she's destined for me, because you keep thinking about her. And next thing you know, she comes to you, and that woman is really not for you. Everyone understand this? Wallahu a'lam. Next question says, what should I do about my savings account? Accumulation of interest. Take the money that you put into your account and nothing more. Take the money that you put in. You put in $10,000, $20,000, take your $20,000. But then about the accumulation of 20, 30, 40, 50 years of interest. Do I squander that wealth? Do I just throw it away? Do I just leave it to the bank? Do I leave it to the riba system? Or a person may say, take that wealth, I don't eat from it. I don't drive on it or wear it or sleep on it. I don't benefit from it. Nor do I give it as sadaqah, but I'm going to make some use to the money. At-takhallus, I'm going to get rid of it somehow, and something which is better than squandering it. Everyone understand the concept? Squandering wealth. I have 20,000, 30,000, Allah, maybe $1 million, Allah, how much money? From interest. Just throw it away, burn it. Obviously that's going to be a problem. And there's going to be another problem, you eating from it. And spending it on your family and giving it as sadaqah. So what to do with the money? How many needy masjids are there? How many needy Muslims are there around the world? And which that money can do what? Work wonders for them. So if a person said, I'm not saying I say this, but if a person said, take your capital sums, your money, and do what? Take that money, that accumulation, and what? Do something with it. But make sure that it's something which is in a noble cause, like sadaqah, seeking the reward of it. And perhaps Allah Azza wa Jalla will reward you for your intention of doing something good with the wealth. As far as just squandering wealth, it's problematic. Now, how did the money get into the savings account? What's the rule on having a savings account? Interest versus usury, that's a long discussion in itself. Were you sinful for having the money in there in the first place? But that's not the question. The question is now, what do I do now? You know what I'm saying? So perhaps, one may say, that's the best thing to do, perhaps. Wallahu a'lam. Fadl. Question in regards to what's going on in Sudan, the Sudan. Where we have Sudan or other countries, political unrest, so on and so forth. The government and the regime, they say it's the fault of the protesters, and the protesters say that it's the fault of the government, so on and so forth. It's a very simple, easy answer. Also, the next part of the question was the position of Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, etc. It takes 2 hands to clap. It takes 2 hands to clap. So the leader has a responsibility and a role, and the subject has a responsibility and a role. Once something goes wrong, there could be someone who starts the problem, who ignites the fire, but somehow, somewhere down the line, the subject is involved as well. Is it of equal percentage? Doesn't necessarily have to be. It could be 90-10, 10-90, 60-40. But it takes 2 hands to what? To clap. If the leader is doing something evil, wrong, oppressing the people, the subject is supposed to advise him. Take a stance. Inkar, munkar, nasiha, whatever that issue is. A bully. Whose fault is it that someone beats you up and takes your milk money and busts your nose? It's whose fault? It's the bully. But is it not some of your fault as well for letting a person just attack you and beat you up, no matter how big and strong they are? You could kick them, spit them, throw money in your pocket at them, run from them, do something, tell them, do something. But you let somebody just come and beat you up and take your money. Eventually, you're what? You're at fault at a percentage. Let alone the fact, why don't you learn how to defend yourself? Do something, your natural instinct. Everyone understand this? So therefore, when it comes to the government and politics and things like this, there lies no doubt. There are governments and there are regimes and presidents and leaders who are tyrannical, they're oppressive. There's no question about that. And there are subjects who are righteous and overtrodden and oppressed and wronged. There's no doubt about that. And then there are other places in which the governments aren't so bad. And the subjects are bad subjects. Or it's a mixture of what? Of both. Alright? So that's just the reality of life. At the end of the day, the position of Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah with regards to these different issues, then of course, like many other issues today, it's a mess. There are those who say there's no such thing as protesting, there's no such thing as speaking against it, make dua for the ruler, there's no such thing as kufr, there's no takfir, you can't say that, you're a khariji, blah, 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 blah. And then those on the opposite side, everything is because of the ruler. The ruler is evil, the ruler is this. Kullu shay. Once the ruler comes in exchange, then we'll be righteous, we'll do the right thing, everything will magically change. And there's no self-reflection or criticism, but it's all the fault of the ruler. And no matter what the Quran and Sunnah say, we have to change it, we have to do something, we have to fix it. That's obviously a what? A problem as well. The bottom line is that how the people live today is very different than how the Muslims lived in the past. Very different. Alright? We talk about protesting, it's protesting halal or haram. There lies no doubt. Back in the day, the whole concept of government was extremely different. Even among non-Muslims themselves. The world, the modern world, was never the same after the French Revolution. Ever. It was never the same. And before the French Revolution, non-Muslims lived extremely differently than how they live today. With regards to government, king, queen, noble, peasant, democracy, voting, republic, so on and so forth. Totally different. So therefore, if we have a new modern day issue, we have to look at the Quran and the Sunnah. What does the Quran and the Sunnah say about protesting directly? Does it say anything? If it does, we take that. And if it doesn't say anything directly against it, then we have to look. What is included in protesting? What does it include? What does it lead to, of good or of bad? And make the correct decision. Wallahu a'lam. Fadl Shaykh.
I want to ask you a question about the hadith regarding the women. Hadith says that the women are deficient in being
Questions regarding the hadith that says women are deficient in their deen and in their intellect. Is that weak? Is that sahih? Is that daif? Etc. It's an authentic hadith collected by Imam al-Bukhari and collected by many others as well. It's an authentic hadith. Hadith on sahih, authentic. As far as what it means and how is it understood and so on and so forth, is it literal, is it figurative, then I think what we mentioned about slavery, those principles, can help you have a better understanding of that hadith. Secondly, last but not least, is some of the ulama of Islam, they say that the hadith can have one or two main meanings. Reason number one, or meaning number one, is that which is mentioned in the hadith itself. When the Messenger of Allah says, مَا رَأَيْتُ مِنْ نَاقِصَاتِ عَقْلٍ وَدِينٍ أَذْهَبَ لِلُبِّ الرَّجُلِ الْحَازِمِ مِنْ إِحْدَاكُنَّ. He says, I've never seen women that can distract a resolute man faster than one of you. I've never seen women who lack intelligence, lack deen, that can mess somebody up faster than one of you. Adhaba, that can take a man's aql, who's a strong man, one of you women. They ask the question, what is the deficiency of our religion? And what is the deficiency of our aql, our intellect, our minds? The Prophet says when she menstruates, she doesn't fast, she doesn't pray. That's the deficiency in her religion. I.e., when a man is praying, a woman cannot pray. And it's another reason why a woman cannot be an imam in al-Islam. It's another reason why a woman cannot be a leader, a khalifa in al-Islam. She has to lead the people in the salah. She's menstruating. Then what? her husband requires her, then what? It just can't work. It will never work like that. So that's from the deficiency of her religion. And then with regards to the deficiency of her intellect, her mind, he says, Alaysat shahadatu, isn't the witness and the testimony of a man to a woman? Meaning that's the law. And that's from the deficiency of her aql. Oh, min nuqsani. That's one interpretation. Interpretation number two is that a woman and her thinking process and her emotional acceptance is different than that of a man. And men are supposed to, and when we say men are supposed to, we're talking about men as a whole, not every man, because there's some men that are very feminine. And there's some men who imitate the opposite sex and vice versa. And that's why the Prophet said he cursed the people who do that. Men who act like women are cursed, women who act like men are cursed. There are men who talk, who gossip, who backbite like women. Worse. Why the other do that? Worse. Unfortunately. But a man is supposed to be someone who's more rational. He's supposed to, I said, al-muftarad, supposed to be someone who thinks more, who looks at logic more, and oftentimes, not every time, there are many women who are very wise and very logical and rational. A woman is supposed to be someone who is more open to the emotional sense, the feelings. You may have an argument with your wife for an hour, for 30 minutes, a bad fight, and you're right. You're stating facts and proofs and evidences and this and that. What happened? I didn't do this. He says, well, that's how I feel. My feelings. That's how I feel. You've wasted your time for 59 minutes having an argument. Because she never ever argued with you about facts and logic and reason. She's only arguing with you how she feels. It's not, I don't feel right. I'm hurt. I'm this and that. And many saying, what did I do? I didn't do it. That's not true. Halal, haram, you did it or not. That's how she what? That's how she feels. You're sitting with your wife in the living room. Your son comes in crying. What's the matter, son? I fell down. Abdurrahman took my toy, such and such and such. Take the toy back, get back up, and go. And the mother, she says, come here. She gives him a hug. What's the matter? Oh, such and such, such and such, such and such. He stops crying immediately. It's a difference. And how you look at things, how you talk. And the children, they know that. So a man is always rigidly logical. And a woman is what? It's different. So this one interpretation of this hadith is that women, they look at things sometimes and their emotions cloud them and color their judgment. And a man is supposed to look at things for what they are. Feelings, like, dislike, hate, or like, this is the truth, kalas. And sometimes that's a what? That's a major what? That's a flaw and a major weakness. Sometimes, not all of the times, we says, men, they do what needs to be done. And a woman may do what she what? Feels, which is not necessarily the best thing for everyone. Everyone understand this? So there's some of the interpretations of the authentic hadith. And of course, there's a problem. This hadith is never going to be politically correct. You can't have Islam 2.0 with this hadith. It just won't work. It won't work. This is reality. So a political or politically correct Islam is something that you're going to be looking for and searching for a very long time. The authentic, true Islam, unfortunately. Everyone understand this? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. We'll take one last question, inshallah. We'll take one question. We'll take a few questions from online and then we'll stop, inshallah. Because I know it's time for Isha. Question says, initials SE from Munich, Germany. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi mufti. Do you have your permission to translate your videos into German? Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Yes, you do. May Allah bless you and reward you for your efforts. Next question, RA from Richmond, California. What's the ruling on praying 2 rak'ah when entering the masjid for Fajr? May Allah bless you with another wife. Say Ameen. At the end of the day, the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, when you enter the masjid, make 2 rak'ah before you sit down. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he didn't specify what time, what prayer, what masjid. He said, don't sit down until you make 2 rak'ah, whatever the prayer is. If you come into the masjid and the adhan has been made for Salat al-Fajr, or Fajr has come in and the adhan hasn't been made, but it's time for Fajr, and you didn't make your 2 sunnah for Fajr, then kill 2 birds with 1 stone. Make the 2 rak'ah with the intention of the sunnah of Fajr. And that will suffice you from the Tahiyyatul Masjid. And you don't have to make 2 special rak'ah before you sit down. Any prayer that you make, 2 or more rak'ah will suffice you. So if you came into the masjid and you made Salatul Dhuhr, you sat down, khalas. You don't have to get up and make 2 extra rak'ah. 4 swallows 2. And it doesn't have to, it can be fard, sunnah, or whatever the prayer may be. And Allah knows best, that's in brief. Last question that we'll take tonight. I'm so sorry, brothers and sisters. I know there are many questions here, and there are many, many questions online. Question says, Abu Muqbil al-Pakistani from London, UK. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Akhi, been problems in understanding the difference between al-Musnad, al-Muttasil, and al-Marfu'. Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. May Allah bless you. Abu Muqbil al-Pakistani from the UK. It's a very simple answer, inshallah ta'ala. With regards to the sciences of a hadith, there are things which are similar, and there are things which have differences with similarities. Before we answer the question and simplify it, I don't know if you have, we've answered this question. Watch the playlist on the Baquniyah, watch the playlist on Nukhbat al-Fikr, and watch the playlist on At-Tadhkira Ibn al-Mulaqqin. Those are 3 classical, traditional texts of Mustalah that we've explained from cover to cover, walillahi alhamd, on the channel. Please go back to those explanations. As far as the simplified answer now, then al-Musnad has 2 main meanings. Number 1, al-Musnad is a book of hadith, like Sahih Bukhari, like Sunan Abu Dawud, but it is arranged differently. Sahih Bukhari is based off of chapters. Sunan Abu Dawud is based off of chapters. Muwatta Malik in English is based off of chapters. The book of Tahara, the book of this, the book of that. And the Musnad, like the Musnad of Imam Ahmad, is a book that is based off of the companions. It's sectioned off based off of the companions regardless of the topic of the hadiths. So in the Musnad of Imam Ahmad, the first person that you want to come across is Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiyallahu anhu. Imam Ahmad, let's say hypothetically, he collected 20 hadiths, all from Abu Bakr. One hadith talks about inheritance, one hadith talks about enjoying the good, forbidding the evil, without no specific topic. That's not the case with Sahih al-Bukhari. Sahih al-Bukhari, Kitab al-Iman, Kitab al-Badi al-Wahi, Ibn Abbas, Fulan, Fulan, Fulan. And we've explained that. As far as the second meaning about Musnad, then it is the hadith. It's the hadith of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. It is ظاهر الاتصال ومرفوع إلى النبي عليه الصلاة والسلام. It seems to have a connected continuous chain, and it is also attributed to the Prophet. قال رسول الله فعل رسول الله أقر رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. And it seems to be outwardly authentic. As far as al-muttasil, then it's the narration متصل سنده بغض النظر هل هو مرفوع أم موقوف أم مقطوع. Its chain of narration is continuous. It isn't broken. There's no tadlis or irsal or inqita'. That's al-muttasil. And as far as al-marfu', the al-marfu' hadith is a hadith that is attributed to the Prophet ﷺ, regardless whether it has a chain of narration or not. Regardless whether it has an authentic chain of narration or not. So we see that there are similarities between all 3 and differences between all 3. Allah Azza wa Jalla surely knows best. Please forgive me, my brothers and sisters. We have to make salat al Isha. Bidnillah ta'ala, hopefully we have another time which we can help answer some of the questions. Wa sallallahu sallam wa barak ala abdihi wa rasulihi nabina wa imamina Muhammad.